Let's talk about the 2010 World Cup. Cue the vuvuzelas. The 2010 World Cup deserves a little bit of a rewind. We can take it all the way back to the 1960s, 1950s, when South Africa was suspended, then eventually banned from FIFA because for apartheid concerns. Then it comes back in 1992 and earns the moniker the boys, because they're like boys playing against men. They were so bad. Then they get it together in 1996 with Buthelezi, Neil Tovey, Eric Tinkler, Lucas Radebe. That team ends up winning the African Cup of Nations. Then they qualified to the World Cup in 1998, and even though they come out in the first round, they comport themselves decently. They qualify again in 2002. Then in 2004, they go up to, they put in a bid to host the World Cup. Now South Africa is a comparatively advanced society in the continent, definitely in the region, right? They'd also hosted the Rugby World Cup, that Invictus World Cup, so they have some infrastructure, though they would need a lot more to host the far bigger Soccer World Cup. They put together a star team, and in 2004, the team contains Danny Jordan, who was the chief executive, Irvin Koza. These are some big names, right, in the soccer world, that are in the football world, that are leading the bid to host the World Cup in 2000. They're bidding to host the 2010 World Cup, but this is happening in 2004. But they also bring us some heavy hitters, man. There's the South African president at the time, Thabo Mbeki. There's Nobel Peace Prize winner and anti-apartheid hero Archbishop Desmond Tutu. May his soul rest in peace. And of course, the big man himself, Umar Diba, Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela, also on the committee, right? And they're going up, and I think it had been decided that that World Cup was going to go to Africa. South Africa had gone up against Germany to host the 2006 World Cup, and they'd lost out by just one vote. This time they were up against Morocco and Egypt, and boy was it heated. To this day, some things haven't really been resolved. But ultimately, South Africa got 14 votes, Morocco got 10, and Egypt got none. The World Cup was coming to the Cape, was coming to South Africa, was coming to Zululand. So the World Cup in 2010 would take place in South Africa. Host nation gets a bye into the tournament. You can't have the tournament without the host nation. This was the one World Cup with 6 African teams, right? Because South Africa was already in. Then there was the 5 that qualified. So in addition to South Africa, we had Nigeria, right? Remember Nigeria, Algeria, Ivory Coast, and Cameroon, and Ghana. So no new teams, right? All these teams have been to the World Cup before. In fact, a couple of them, Nigeria, Cameroon, and Ghana, have made it to the last 16 at some point. So, and South Africa, if you remember that first game against Mexico, where they drew 1-1, and that opening goal by Spiwe Tshabalala, man, that drove the crowd wild, didn't it? Incredible goal. It's one of the best stars to a World Cup tournament that I remember. And I may be biased, but it seems like a lot of people get good vibes from that. They ended up drawing that match 1-1, though, before losing 3-0 to Uruguay. And even though they won 2-1 against a capitulating French team, right, which France had this thing where they do well one World Cup and struggle in the next one. Even though they did that, they got 4 points. It wasn't enough for them to qualify to the second round. So Mexico and Uruguay ended up qualifying ahead of them. And South Africa, in so doing, became the first World Cup hosts to be eliminated in the first group stage. On one hand, that is obviously not great. But on the other, they comported themselves well and they hosted this tournament very well. And they were not a bad team. They were no Qatar. I'm sorry, it's eliminated from the first round. But they played well. However, and other teams that the rest of the teams too, with the exception of Ghana, were also eliminated in the group stages: Nigeria, Algeria, Ivory Coast, and Cameroon. However, Ghana progressed beyond the group stages for the second time in a row and defeated the US 2-1 after extra time in the round of 16. Remember, I told you that there was that rivalry between the US and Ghana that had started in 2006. It continues here, and it really sort of hit fever pitch here. So they make it to the quarterfinals, becoming the third African nation to do so, after Cameroon, Senegal, and now Ghana. Very fascinating given the early dominance of the North African teams, right? That I've hampered on a lot about. But it's also interesting that the first three African teams to make it to the quarterfinals had been West African teams. Very, very interesting dynamic. Of course, that would soon change as recent results show. But in the quarterfinals, one of the greatest World Cup games of all time. You already know what I'm talking about. Uruguay versus Ghana. Incredible match. Incredible match. This says this is the best match ever played in the World Cup. I'm not fighting them. I think the most recent final between France and Argentina it might be number one, but this is an incredible match, right? Remember, the first World Cup on African soil. All the other African teams have been eliminated. Ghana is our last hope. The continent has rallied behind this team, and they're playing well. And in that first half, just before the referee blows the first whistle, my man Sally Montari from Ghana scorches one out from distance, right? A grounder, all right? From outside the box, and beats Fernando Muslera of Uruguay in goal. It's a great goalkeeper. We come back into the second half. Is Ghana going to be the first African team to make it to the semifinals and do it on African soil, right, with the vuvuzelas blaring in the background? Second half, Uruguay gets a free kick. The great Diego Forlan, who I believe wins the golden boot in this tournament, gets a free kick from distance. And boy, does he take that shot, and he beats Richard Kingston in goal for Ghana. Incredible goal to match the first incredible goal by Salim Montari. It's 1-1. And it goes into extra time. It's looking like it's headed to penalties, right? But Ghana hasn't given up yet. At this point, Ghana hasn't given up yet. Their captain, Stephen Appiah, mighty, mighty man. He drives the team forward, right? Gets into the box. Dominic Adia, right? Takes a shot in the box. He beats the goalkeeper. And on the line, the shot is blocked. Right? And it comes back that it's been handled. Luis Suarez, who is another legendary Uruguayan player, right? But whose reputation for all his brilliance is sort of compromised by biting people and also this incident. But it's seen that he had used his hands to block the ball. The ball doesn't go in. So what happens? He is red carded. He breaks into tears. It's just a few minutes to go in extra time here. He's in tears, right? He's red carded. He has saved his team in the moment, but has he let them down in the long term because it's now a penalty? But what was he going to do, right? Because the ball is going in, certainly. So he's walking off the field. He is in tears. Asamoah Gyan, who's been on fire in this tournament. Again, one of those World Cup legends. You think of people like Memo Ochoa. You think about Roger Milla. These players who show up at the World Cup and you may not even know where they play their club football and really care like that, you know. But he was there. He lines up to take the penalty. Now, This is not news, and if I'm making you relive this, I apologize. He strikes it with venom, Asamoah Gyan, baby jet, and strikes it against the top bar, the crossbar, the top of the crossbar. Boom! It goes out of play. Suarez, who's been red carded but hasn't left the field entirely, hasn't gone to the locker rooms yet, turns around and celebrates like crazy. Oh boy. And ultimately, the team goes to the penalty shootout, and the Ghana ends up losing out in the penalty shootout with Sebastian Abreu of Uruguay sealing it with an audacious Panenka style, and that was tough. And I don't think, if you saw the most recent World Cup, 2022 World Cup, you can say that Ghana and Uruguay, maybe now, but Ghana still hadn't made peace with this. They were in the same group, and even though neither of them qualified to the second round, to the round of 16, Ghanaians still celebrated like crazy because they had played a role in preventing Uruguay from how spiteful you have to be to celebrate that. We didn't make it ourselves, but we're so glad you didn't make it. We're going to celebrate like we did. Incredible. So that ends the story of Ghana at the 2010 World Cup. The World Cup itself was incredible. A fantastic World Cup South Africa put on. The facilities were flawless. Some people feel some type of way about the vuvuzelas. It is what it is. It's part of that process. It's part of their ambience. It's not as if they caught on and you see them everywhere now, right? Became only the third World Cup to have more than 3 million visitors come to the country for the World Cup. And actually, even though it was in 2010, it actually had a larger number of total attendance and average attendance per game than Russia some 8 years later. So an all-round incredible World Cup.